The latest round of talks between the United States and the Taliban concluded yesterday in Qatar. It is the highest level engagement ever between the adversaries, now nearing the end of a second decade of fighting in Afghanistan. In a moment, we'll hear the Afghan government's perspective on the talks. But first, videographer Sebastian Rich recently sent us exclusive video of American and Afghan operations in southern Afghanistan. And Nick Schifrin reports on how both sides are trying to use battlefield gains to force peacemaking concessions.
Hey, right up here, right up here.
In the 19th year of the Afghan war, Taliban snipers don't miss by very much.
One of the rounds, like, hit 1, 2, and they just went through. I was sitting over there and they flew by my head.
But when these U.S. Marine advisors come under fire in Helmand, the response is organized, mapped out on an iPad, and aimed on this old Russian tank by Afghan soldiers. The Taliban sniper was hit, and afterward, the Afghan commander provided details to the U.S. Marine captain.
Thank you. Let's record.
These days, the Afghan army does the majority of the fighting and dying. Since 2015, the Afghan government says 28,000 Afghan soldiers and police have died. In the same time, the U.S. says 62 American service members have died. The U.S. trains Afghan forces, provides them logistics and intelligence, and supports them with weapons they don't have, like long-range artillery. As weapons are fired outside,
We're 1.3 out, we're turning.
Inside the nearby Joint Operations Command, U.S. Marines track possible fighters with drones or UAVs.
This is the guy who had the crossbody weapon.
This rare footage of aerial surveillance, where nearly 40 Marines and intelligence officers work with drone, helicopter, and aircraft pilots, was screened and cleared by the U.S. Marine unit.
This guy came out of the L-shaped building with the long rifle.
They try and minimize civilian casualties, and they look at video we couldn't film on the equivalent of a DVR.
Oh, you can see
wow,
it.
look at
Yeah,
that.
you can see the barrel actual poking out on his left side.
And stay in communication with a drone pilot.
He has now gone internal to our L-shaped building.
On this day, for 6 hours, they track a man the Marines say was carrying a weapon out of a mosque and likely preparing another attack, walking into this building. And after the military says it checked its intelligence and acquired legal authorization, the drone films as jets strike. After, the camera zooms in on men trying to escape. A few seconds later, gunfire from an aircraft kills them too.
We're looking through a camera off of a UAV, and it's pretty up close and personal when you see those missiles hit human beings.
This is Brigadier General Dale Alford's third deployment to Afghanistan. He's seen this war transform from a light U.S. footprint to a surge of U.S. forces to this deployment, where his unit has suffered 0 casualties.
Marines aren't dying in this, and that's the natural evolution of this war. But there's still a lot of Afghan soldiers and policemen that are dying on a daily basis. And my job is to try to make less of that. And the way we do that is we take out the bad guys.
Over the last year, the Taliban have increased the number of high-profile attacks. The military inspector general says the Taliban control or contest nearly half the country, hoping to obtain leverage in peace talks.
Our mission is to help the Afghan army and police force put military pressure on the Taliban to bring them to the table, to come to some kind of peace agreement. Every war must end.
This war's end is being negotiated by Special Representative for Afghanistan Zalmay Khalilzad, coordinating closely with the military. Yesterday, he concluded the longest ever negotiation round with the Taliban, including the group's recently released deputy leader. Senior U.S. officials tell PBS NewsHour the two sides began to draft agreements on the Taliban's preventing Afghanistan from being used by international terrorists. But the Taliban haven't yet agreed to renounce al-Qaeda. And the talks produced a, quote, sense of convergence on U.S. troop withdrawal, but the U.S. has not yet committed to a timeline. Khalilzad is under pressure to achieve major progress by this summer's planned election. He spoke in Washington in early February.
But it would be better for Afghanistan if we could get a peace agreement before the election, which is scheduled in July.
But the two sides have not agreed on a Taliban ceasefire or the Taliban's meeting directly with the Afghan government, which Khalilzad called the most important and difficult stage.
We have offered to do what we can to be helpful if our help is needed, but it's for the Afghans to decide It's for the Afghans to have the conversations. It's for the Afghans to negotiate with each other. It's for the Afghans to accept each other.
But so far, the Taliban refused to accept even talking directly with the Afghan government. And the Afghan government is concerned about Khalilzad's pace. On Monday, before the latest round of talks ended, I spoke with Nader Nadery, a senior advisor to President Ashraf Ghani. What level of input has President Ghani or your government in general had in Ambassador Khalilzad's talks with the Taliban?
Our level of input we would like to see increased and expanded, the sequence of the different processes, and also we want to see that the different elements, which is the withdrawal of the troops, reduction of the troops, not using Afghanistan or Taliban, cutting their ties with the terrorist groups, then the negotiation with the Afghan government and ceasefire. All of these are interlinked, and the Afghan government want to see being at the center of the table, backed and helped and facilitated by the United States. And I think Ambassador Khalilzad is walking toward that direction.
Right now, you're not at the center of the table. You're not even at the table. These talks are between the United States, as you said, and the Taliban, and you said that you would like our input expanded. I talked to a lot of people in Kabul who are frustrated with Ambassador Khalilzad. Is the government receiving enough information about what he is talking to the Taliban about?
I wouldn't point to the person. The process is designed as such where the government at this stage is not at the center of the table. And that's what we are working. Ambassador Khalilzad is continually briefing the president. We want to see that, not only a briefing, but also much more of a contribution and discussion on the substance of the process. The United States shall, and I think it has the moral authority and the political ability to press the Taliban to preserve the centrality of Afghan constitution, or the space that's been created.
And do you believe that the U.S. is pressing the Taliban to preserve the constitution of Afghanistan?
At this stage, the United States says that it has interest and it has values, but it will leave it to Afghan people to define what they want. And we, as Afghan people, we want to keep the rules of the game in political power preserved. And that is through the Constitution and through preservation and strengthening of the democratic process we have. If we don't preserve that, the civil war will return back. Now, we say we will advocate, we will fight for those values, including women's participation and equal right in the public administration and in society.
President Trump has explained that he wants to withdraw from Afghanistan. Ambassador Khalilzad has talked about needing to have progress, major progress, by the summer. Are you worried that the U.S., as you put it, will not stand with you when it comes to defending the Constitution in order to make a deal quickly?
That's a major fear, and there is a level of anxiety when we see that there is a rush. We do understand and we feel the sense of urgency. We have the sense of urgency as the people of Afghanistan. We want this war to end. We want the guns to be silent. But silencing the guns shall not be in a way that is temporary silence. We want it to be carefully done in a design of an agreement that will result in a proud moment, both for the United States and for Afghans, that when the United States look back to see 17 years of blood and treasure, this is the peace that we have brought in that country and in that region. We are indebted as a nation to the sacrifices the U.S. people have given to us.
You use the word anxiety when it comes to Ambassador Khalilzad's talks. Has that anxiety increased since these talks began?
There's no anxiety about the notion of the talk itself and Zalmay Khalilzad's discussion and engagement. We want to see this war in the true peace discussion, but the anxiety is on the pace of it and the speed of it that distracts all of us from focusing on the substance and content of a peace agreement, because a speeded process and rush process will change the rules of the game, will reset everything, and therefore will be an invitation for civil war. That's where people are worried.
Is the Afghan government concerned that the U.S. will ask President Ghani to essentially step down so that the U.S. can create an interim government
to allow the Taliban in as a part of a peace deal?
Ordinary Afghans across the country want to see their current political system through a model of election continue. And people need to preserve and respect that wish. And that's why the Afghan government is insisting on keeping the election and focus on election continued.
Nader Nadery, Senior Advisor to President Ashraf Ghani and Chairman of the equivalent of Afghan Civil Service. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.